Well, welcome to the Middlesex Moments radio show in the early part of 2015. It's nice to start a new year out fresh. I'm Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College. Today I'm meeting with Rich Lenoce, who is the director of our New Media Center. We've done a lot of coverage of the New Media Center on our radio show, and Don DeCesare did a wonderful live show when we had our grand opening in the fall. Now it's not fall anymore. It's quite cold outside, but those nice memories of those warm days. But windy on the hill, just like it was that day, as I recall. And I thought today we would talk about, the importance and the impact of media on our lives. And Rich, in addition to being the director of the New Media Center, has been teaching this subject for a long time here at the college, and then came to it from the real world of broadcast journalism. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started?
Well, I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York and started, interning and freelancing at TV stations, usually in the news department because that's where most of the production is done in television. So I did some freelancing and interning and decided that TV news really wasn't for me. It's a hard job and has difficult hours. So I ended up going to graduate school and getting my master's in instructional media and technology, and I went into the corporate world where I worked for Aetna, Life and Casualty in Middletown here for 10 years, and in charge of their media department, teleconferencing, broadcast studio, auditoriums, lecture halls. There was an education center there as well that was integrated with the broadcast part because we were sending classes around the country by satellite at that time. So I had kind of an unlimited budget and a wonderful job because Aetna was really invested at that time in the technology. In fact, they owned the satellites that we were using to bounce courses and conferences on. So I did that for 10 years and I was using Middlesex interns at the time, and found that they were much better prepared than ones from more expensive private schools. And I taught a class here as an adjunct.
What was the first class you taught?
It was a Cable Television 1. It was a media class. We no longer offer. I was on cable television in the cable television industry.
Which, really got... how long has cable been around?
Well, it's really been around since the 50s, but in organized, it was mostly in very rural areas where they didn't have an antenna on your roof, didn't do you any good, so you had to put a community antenna up and then share with others. And that's how it got started back in the 50s. But it really didn't become popular in other areas where, like Connecticut, until the mid-70s.
I was wondering about that. So tell me about, so you put an antenna up in rural areas and do what? Do you send signals through a wire?
Yeah. Normally it was done by the appliance dealer in the town because they were selling washing machines and everything else. But at the time, if you remember, they sold televisions. That's where you got your television, was at an appliance store. So the appliance person would rent a space on a hill and then put it up in an antenna, a TV antenna, and then run the wire down to what we call a head end that would then distribute it to the homes in the area by wire.
That's great. The evolution of that kind of technology is amazing to think about.
So people couldn't get television, but now they could.
Right. And I remember how clearly that was in rural Minnesota, believe me. So, all right, we have to take a break because the first part of the show goes by like the blink of an eye, and we will be right back. Well, we're back to Middlesex Moments radio show. And today I'm speaking with Rich Lenoce about the New Media Center, but really we want to talk about why we care about media and how media has changed. And just before the break, we were talking a bit about cable television in rural areas a long, long time ago in the prehistory of the current cable network system. So you were saying over the break that things might be changing or need to change in the cable world? What trends do you see?
Well, if you think about it, it really hasn't changed all that much from the 1950s where there was one big antenna and it fed multiple programs to people. So when I was a kid, we could only get 12 channels on a VHF tuner, and we could pick up New York, so it was full. But all we could get was 12. And then in 1975, they came in with cable, and now we could get 25. But now we paid for it before we didn't pay for it.
Right. A lot of people objected to the idea of having to pay for television.
Yes, and so as cable's built on a model where every channel, when you pay your cable bill, you can actually go online and see at the Department of Public Utilities how much each channel costs you every month. So ESPN, for example, is about $6. TNT is about $2, let's say. So you add that all up based on the number of channels that you have, and some are just a few cents. But you add those up, all the channels, that's your cable bill.
But then they bundle it because you could say, oh, I only want to watch the Food Network, so just give me that for $3 a month. And they say, no, sorry, you got to get everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we don't really watch ESPN. My wife loves hockey, and she just wants the hockey channel. But she has to get the whole sports package, which is very expensive. Instead, I could just go buy her, she's a Red Wings fan, I could just go buy her a subscription to the Red Wings website, and she can, or the NHL app that's on Roku, and she could just access that game when she wants. So she could access whole games, new games, and stream live game on the web or on a Roku app.
So that's going to really put pressure on the cable networks. What will happen?
Well, what's happening just across communications with young people? Take the telephone. All the people in my generation have wired phones in their house. But my nieces and nephews, they don't even think of having, why would you have a wired phone if you've got a cell phone? So why pay for that? Why not just pay for the cell bill and get it that way? And so if AT&T or if Comcast or whatever cable company it is offering this phone, and they're offering internet, and they're offering cable, well, you can look at it and say, and a lot of young people are doing this, why do I need the cable when I have the internet? And why do I need the phone if I have a cell phone? And I can also use voice over IP on the internet, so it doesn't really matter because that's what Comcast is using. So I could just go out and buy my own voice over IP box and plug it into the internet if I want a wired phone. So it ends up that a lot of people are just purchasing the internet, and they're using Netflix and Hulu or many of the free apps and sites out there to watch television. My children get up in the morning. They get on their Kindle. My daughter gets on her Kindle. My son gets on his iPad, and they go watch the cartoons they want to watch when they want to watch them from YouTube or Netflix or whatever source they have access to. And that's a lot less expensive than that big bundle of channels that ESPN's $6 and TNT's $1.75 or whatever. And it all adds up. So we just pay for what we want.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the mega industries like oil, because the oil industries are so invested in so many things that they're working to maintain their position in the market. Yeah. So it's hard to get off of gasoline powered cars, for example, because the oil industry is they want to maintain their hold in the economy. So the whole kind of cable industry is a huge monolithic industry. They're not going to want to just become the sort of blacksmiths of the 21st century where people don't need them anymore. So,
well, they had a niche, and their niche was sports. That people who love sports, and it's the number one reason that people actually have cable. I just read a study yesterday that ESPN is just enormous, the number of people who watch it as a single entity, as a single channel rather than the 200 that when they're streaming a basketball game, a college basketball championship or whatever, that millions of people tune in at once to it. So sports has always been cable's real stronghold. The other stronghold was movies on the HBO, Stars, and Showtime, those kind of stations. You have to get the whole bundle of cable channels, and then you pay for HBO. Yes. And then you pay for Showtime. So now you're paying $15 for HBO, you're paying $15 for Showtime. It's on top of all those other channels. Well, in the last few weeks, something happened. A couple of things happened. Two things happened that affect those two areas. One is HBO has a product called HBO On The Go. It's an app you can have on your cell phone or your iPad, but you have to subscribe to the tier of HBO on to get access on cable. So you have to subscribe to that tier to HBO on cable in order to get access to HBO On The Go. They get a code or whatever, and they put it in. Well, the chairman of HBO said that there's the possibility that HBO On The Go would be available on a monthly basis.
So you can subscribe to something through an app.
Right, without having to subscribe to the cable.
Yeah.
Now that Hertz, Comcast, and Cox, and all those AT&T and all, because that's how they, they sell. Oh, we'll give you this package at this amount. You're going to pay this much more for HBO if you want to watch The Sopranos or whatever the hot girls or whatever the hot show is on, because they do quality programming. But now it's being unbundled from that. And then yesterday, a product came out called Sling TV.
And this is?
So I believe it's owned by Dish Network. I haven't read too much about it, but it's 25 channels, and you pay a flat rate of, I don't know, $20 a month or something. I don't know what it is. People can look it up online. And but it includes 25 channels, and they're cable channels. There's the popular ones, CNN and ESPN. So now, where people turned to cable to get ESPN, because you can't get that from broadcast TV, and you couldn't get that from the internet, now you can when that comes online this quarter. And it'll be one price, and they're rolling out apps to all the various platforms out there. For a lot of people, I can't see my dad turning to it. He's 80. Right. I can't see him turning to it. He's got his cable, and it's not even high def. And, it's cable coming out of the wall as it had in 1975 in the same house and almost the same TV. But if you're a young person, you're going to be changing services. You're going to be, wow, this is really hot. I jumped on Netflix because I wanted to see the Kevin Spacey drama.
House of Cards.
House of Cards.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
So I quit Hulu and I jumped to Netflix. Now when someone else, another service, offers a pro like HBO on the go, maybe HBO will have a new show I want to watch. I'll quit Netflix and I'll go to HBO on the go until I've watched all my Game of Thrones, for example. So you just switch.
There must be like a rolling down the hill effect of this. Like, for example, was it HBO that did House of Cards?
No, Netflix.
Netflix. Okay, so they created, and the breakthrough there was they gave it to you, the whole thing to you all at once. So you didn't have to wait, and like Downton Abbey, you have to wait every week to see what happened in season 5. But they obviously paid their actors and their writers, and they're set to create House of Cards. Mm-hmm. So if their shows are available on a less expensive platform, is it going to impact them? I mean, HBO itself must make money from those subscriptions.
Yeah, but imagine how many people they don't get who can't afford the $175. I just got our cable bill today.
Oh, I know.
And I fell over because last month I called them and it was up to $155 for just basic cable. And it jumped this month to $175.
Right.
And so I'm ready to call them this afternoon and either say, just give me the most basic channels you have, or I quit. I couldn't afford to add, another $25 onto the $175 to have HBO. So imagine all the people who can't afford $200 a month for cable TV now can afford $10 a month for HBO on the go.
It's unbundling. So you can actually, if you only watch the Food Network, you can just order that up, and that's all you have to pay for.
That's all you have to pay for.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Downton Abbey. That's an interesting one. It's broadcast in September. Starting in September on the British channel that it's broadcast on. But we don't get to see it till January because that's the contract. So there are many Downton Abbey fans out there who want to see it. And it's being streamed over the web in Great Britain to their public so they can get on their YouTube or whatever and watch it. Well, what people are doing here in the United States is blocked through a server. You can't get to it from the United States.
I was going to say, otherwise you will get to it, yeah.
But people are accessing it who are in the know can go to something called a proxy server, put in this number into their browser, and it reroutes them as if their computer is in England.
So there are people
and they can watch it.
People who know who got married in season 5. Yeah. All right, well, we need to take a break, and we'll be right back. Well, welcome back to Middlesex Moments Radio Show. I'm Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, and Rich Lenoce is with me today, and he's the director of our new media center. And we were just talking about Downton Abbey, which I'm sure most of the people in this audience are either watching or thinking about watching. And you were saying that in England it's broadcast in the fall, but the contract is that we don't get to see it in the U.S. until January, and there are ways around that. Mm-hmm. So people are figuring out how to get into that, and so what we were talking about over the break is the fact of the matter is, I mean, cable and the internet. The cable is limited, right, geographically, but the internet is really not limited. Nope. So it's the world.
It's the whole world.
And this most recent example of the film, The Interview, which was a Sony product, Seth Rogen
Mm-hmm.
and James Franco was so upsetting to Kim Jong-un, who's the leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, that they hacked into Sony's databases, and they somehow, do you know the story? That somehow the emails of chief executives that were derogatory towards stars were leaked, and they really were embarrassed.
Emails were leaked, movies that were being edited were stolen, scripts were stolen, and now they're out there.
Right.
They're out there. The next James Bond movie, the script is not, those are under lock, those are top secret, and now they're somewhere because they were taken. So we live in a world where we have to accept the fact that nothing is private and locked down anymore. That nothing's private and locked down. That it's just, if it's being sent over that wire, that it's there forever and can be found by someone. And even Sony, which did have high security on their internet, it's just never high enough when you have hackers and people remember, the people who write that security code were likely the people who could break into that, because they have to write it, so they understand how to break it. So if you're a computer programmer, you understand those tools. So it's really something today. But then again, I say this to people who say to me, geez, I never buy anything on the internet because they could steal my credit card number. I said, oh, so you're going to go to West Farms Mall and you're going to give a 16-year-old your credit card and hand it to them, and they can write that number down. And they also have that little security number that goes on the back too. So they could do that. So what's the difference?
Yeah, and I'm old enough to remember a time when people were afraid of credit cards because we would get away from actual cash, away from money.
Yeah.
And now, almost nobody carries a lot of money around anymore. Everybody's got that credit card.
Yeah.
And it's all out there in the web. So I wonder, how do you think that the generation of students that we have, and that's, our students go from 10 to 90, so that you can't really qualify our students as one kind of generation, but let's say millennials.
Mm-hmm.
How is this changing the consciousness of millennials? Privacy, with the sense of privacy, and that certainly with Facebook and Tumblr and all those other sorts of accounts, we caution people to be careful what they do put on there.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think it's changed people's senses of privacy or agency, that they have more power, less power than they had before? Are they more knowledgeable? This is the question I wanted to ask you when I was thinking about this program today, which is, there's a difference between reading an entire book and spending time with it. Let's say it's a 300-page book and it takes you 10 hours of just sitting down and thinking about it and reading deeply into a subject, and reading the 140 characters in Twitter or the headline news, or I feel like I dwell mostly in that world of skimming and the headlines, and I worry about not having the 10 hours to think deeply about a subject. Do you see changes in the students that you encounter in the way that they process information and in their kind of moral code or their sense of who they're going to be? Are they going to change the world? What's happening with our students?
I think with some people, it's let the moral code kind of fall and they don't think about it. I had a student recently who friended me on Facebook, and so I clicked friend, and she had posted pictures of herself drinking and in various stages of undress or whatever, and which is fun. She's college, and it was definitely a college type Facebook page. But then she wants to go get a job at CBS or ABC or ESPN. I said, the first thing they do is they get onto your Facebook site and they get onto your LinkedIn site or whatever. And because they want to learn about you and they want to learn the type of person you are. So in some cases, people think, they don't think about privacy. They don't think about that bigger world. They think, only their friends are looking at it. Yet their settings are set to public. Yeah. Or they're set to friends of friends or whatever. So they don't think about it. On the other hand, I have students who are very conscious of it. And, they'll sit down and they skim the news, as you say. But let's think back to, when we were in college. I think we skimmed the news too. I don't think I had the time to really sit down with all my textbooks and all my homework and my research papers. I had to type on a typewriter. That I had the kind of time to sit down and read the New York Times.
Right.
I would skim the New York Times.
And, I don't know. We're relatively close to the same generation. I'll give you a few years less than I have. But that was the advent of USA Today.
Mm-hmm.
That was basically it. It was kind of a Reader's Digest version of a newspaper.
Right.
A little from here, a little from there.
Yep.
When I was living in China in '92, I used to love reading it was probably less than 140 characters, a little news story from Minnesota that would appear in that. So,
Sure.
so we got kind of trained to thinking about just the tops of the icebergs.
I think the most important thing is the quality of the journalism. Isn't necessarily the length of the journalism. Because if you want to learn more, you can always learn more about a certain story. You can go to that New York Times article or whatever and learn more about it. But is the story right? Is it correct? Is it being reported correctly? Is it a biased website you're getting that news from? And what is that bias? Can you find it? Where is it? So you have to be, and that we could say the same thing about newspapers. Newspapers we know are as biased as any website. So, or cable news channel or whatever it happens to be. Just bias is a part. We always have this idealistic view of journalism that it's completely objective, and that has never been. And there are many fine people out there who that is their ethic, but there are organizations that's not their ethic. They're entitled to be biased, and so it's really whether it's right and what is the bias. What are they trying to get you to think about? So, the tenet of journalism of getting it right, getting the facts, making sure things aren't misreported, is just as important today as it was in 1981 when Reagan was shot and they said that his press secretary, James Brady, was dead.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. So, it was wrong information. It was wrong. And it's the same thing today, and it's faster now. Because I remember a couple of years ago when Michael Jackson died, I was in the middle of a film shoot, and I went over and I, flipped through the TV during the film show. So Michael Jackson had died, and I came out to the crew and I said, "Did you know Michael Jackson died?" And they were all young people. It was a film industry training program there, and they all seen it on their cell phone, 2 hours before, because it came over like that.
Right.
Whereas CNN might be sitting around checking facts on it. Traditional news organizations might be doing that, whereas it was on the internet because somebody saw Michael Jackson go into an ambulance to the morgue or whatever.
Yeah, now we have we have fictional accounts of news taking up exactly that subject. Mm-hmm. So there's The Hour, which is the BBC show about the very first sort of 60 minutes that they created after World War II. They wanted people to be able to, hear within an hour all the news that they ought to know. This actually, I have to say, I've become addicted to your morning briefing on the New York Times. There's a Tuesday morning briefing. This is all the news you need to know. Then there's the newsroom, which is just finished. It's not. It's a couple of seasons of it, and at the end, they get caught up. They're a cable news network, and they've been bought by another. So there's that whole kind of mergers and acquisitions reality that they have to deal with. But it focuses on the Boston bombing, the Boston Marathon bombing, and they want to wait to be sure that they have the information, whereas everybody else is out immediately broadcasting it, and it hurts them commercially in terms of the money that they earn because they're more cautious about it.
I think the plus in that is when it is right, they'll have more details about it. It'll have more depth to it. I think a traditional news organization could put the resources into depth, like the New York Times. You could read the New York Times still all week, the Sunday Times. Yes. It could stick with you all week and never, you'd never finish it. So you get that kind of depth. But we also have, the access that's very fast. So yes, there are organizations out there that are constantly, putting out the quick information, but there are other organizations that are, sit on the story. I think the AirAsia is a good example of that. If you've been watching cable news, it's been pretty much dominated. It 100% dominated cable news over the holidays, and still is a large part of their reporting. And there's a lot more depth to it than you might get, say, on the Huffington Post, which put it up once, and that was it. People read it, and they don't need to see it every day. Whereas now we're learning, more bodies were found. Today they found a tail, which has a black box in it. So we're getting more depth, whereas those smaller web journalism organizations reported it, and then poof, they went on to the next thing.
Do you think that the money, as you talk about that, obviously these online sites, and they're the big ones that everybody recognizes, like Huffington Post, and then the minor ones, and there are millions, probably zillions of them.
Yes.
Is the money that makes those possible going to continue to grow for the ads? I mean, are those ads effective? Where does the money come from?
It's a difficult. One of the problems is that it's difficult. They've had trouble building a business model. There's no single, like with television, there's a business model of the ratings and everything. On the internet, it's pretty much what you want to do. So if you're the New York Times, you could have a paywall where people go and they see, a little bit of an article, you want to read more, you have to subscribe. So they have the paywall model, and then other sites like Huffington Post don't have a paywall. They have, they put up ads throughout their pages. And so there's a lot of work that's being done now to see if that, is an effective model. I think what's going to happen is that each organization is going to have its own business model. What works for it is, I think, what we're finding.
And then the strong will prevail, and the weaker models will fall apart.
Yes,
we could talk for a couple of days.
Yeah, we could.
So you have to come back, and we'll keep talking about it. This is fascinating. It is wonderful. Thank you so much for coming today. And I just want to say thank you to WLIS WMRD for giving us an opportunity to talk about things that are important to our community, but also have some relevance to what we do here at Middlesex Community College. This is Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, wishing you all a good day.